Okay, but here's the big comment from Keith that's very interesting to check out. This is from level 57 complete, and this is where he's gone the whole way through the course, through the intermediate course, and there's going to be more for him very soon. But let's take a look at this final comment from Keith after getting through 1,000 characters in a week. So let's see what he says here. Thank you, Phil and Luke, for your recent responses to many of the comments I've been leaving regarding my attempt at a 1,000 characters in a week attempt. I continue to find your comments most validating and insightful. I thought I'd just finish up debriefing about how the 1 week experiment, concluded. As mentioned in an earlier comment of mine, it was looking pretty grim to finish initializing all of the words by the technical end of 1 week. In fact, it took pretty much somewhere into an 11th day total to get everything straightened out, both in my mind and on Anki. By the way, I see you discovered my couple of errors in my example using 4 types of qing. You're quite right, of course. I was rushing. I'd noticed them myself shortly after submitting the comment I had written. Corrective notes into an edit of the comment. Just as you mentioned in your video response, it was easy to modify the scenes accordingly. Later, I make a comment about not allowing characters to touch objects or other characters or directly refer to other characters by name or what props they may be using. Previously, based upon the only 2 quote-unquote muddled memories I'd experienced where I truly could not isolate who belonged to what, allowing these sort of quote-unquote trespass muddled the memory process in a rather distinct sort of way. Abiding by this rule, characters may form as complex of dialogues as they wish with each other so long as they are not directly looking at other characters, directly addressing them, or touching their props or bodies. Using the technique doesn't require having characters interact from the beginning of developing a Henze movie method scene whatsoever. It is, however, definitely an extremely useful way to catalyze a starter set of laterally connected characters before refining as needed on Anki. As to the 11-day total, there isn't much of significance to say beyond yet another earlier post of mine in which I gave detail. Yet 3 fine points come up. 1. Rolling the process forward with next day Anki reviews showed. Day 8, 400 plus characters to review, 10.1 second per character average at 96% comprehension. Day 9, 500 plus characters to review, 11.3 second per character on average at 94% retention. Day 10, 600 plus characters to review, 15.4 second per character average at 87% retention. Note 1. Really not bad. Some of that time is just me letting the clock run past the 1 minute Anki default timer while I double check a prop or get sidetracked. Note 2. Anki can certainly be leveraged in other ways to promote various forms of development. Reviewing words at random is only one sort of usefulness. It takes a bit of learning Anki itself to start separating cards into character first or English word first subdecks. However, it's well worth it, as by the time I have already gone on to further cement the process by reviewing all characters using the custom study days in advance settings to really help ease a sort of top-down set and bottom-up set, as well as an everything randomly combined set. More on that below. All right, interesting. Note 3. Although I had listened to a comment made by an Anki Power user to the effect of a proven statistically greater retention long-term if one actually extends the default time on one of Anki's review timers from 10 days out to 15 days, there are, in my strong opinion, 3 excellent benefits from also doing quote-unquote speed runs. Note 3A, it boosts the facility for sight reading and sight pronouncing characters. Note 3B, in conjunction with the fact of exposure to several different fonts, at least 4 from across the website, Anki on my PC and Anki on my Android, there is further challenge of induction to notice little details and make/have denser associative realizations. Note 3C1. It enables one to create a habit which will eventually culminate in an average reduction of review time that is perfectly manageable with respect to, say, 1 character/second total accuracy or better, meaning one can fit a relatively large selection to reasonably within a 25-minute time box. Similarly, I have 4 Mandarin poster board sets with the first 1,000 characters and second 1,000 characters in both simplified and traditional. You have a photograph of the very same model of poster on one of your website pages, actually. Eventually, reviewing an entire poster board should easily come in under 25 minutes. Note 3C2 extended. Less obvious is that by warming up or activating so many characters in so short a time, such reviews sort of make lateral considerations far more accessible as characters learned a month ago occur to one's mind to compare and contrast with the character learned a week ago, and so on. There's a classical adage in Psychology and Neurology 101 which says, "Fire together, wire together, out of sync, do not link." Yeah, it makes sense to me. Similarly, seeing strings of similar characters that one already strongly recognizes presented right next to each other in time or space by whatever organizing criterion one chooses facilitates a strong understanding of what, in modern psychology, is called prototyping. These prototyping developments require allowing the Henze scenes, which we worked up as necessary scaffolding, to then shift around and or sluice away as needed as other more sensible bonds of direct in-language develop. This is a really good point. Like you make the scenes partially to just kind of create a scaffold to give something to placehold the character until you can learn it the proper way, which is through the language. I mean, once you're using the characters over and over in the language, you don't need the scene anymore. That's a question that comes up all the time. It's like, well, I have to remember these scenes forever? And the answer is definitively no, because eventually you'll completely master it within the language. Continuing, I've returned to a far more considered review. Now all of the props and radicals is a separate network of complement to my daily review of the quote-unquote core characters. Not wishing to disturb the core, I leave aside learning any Mandarin pronunciation of the props and reinforce them in my own separate deck, just so as to have a means of gradually transferring clusters of admittedly English-heavy derived meaning from them to the core's developing internally consistent coherence. Attributing multiple Mandarin character-relevant English meanings to each prop and each core character is extremely useful in facilitating this prototype shuffling, allowing more options for characters and their components, and phonemes to find optimized coherence in whatever the brain's gauge of appropriate n-dimensional abstraction or what not plays around. Sorry, I sometimes have trouble reading what Keith has written here because it's a little bit over my head. I mean, like it's got a lot of psychological terms, but I'm generally following. I also made separate subdecks from the Anki vocab decks to isolate all English first flashcards away from Mandarin character first cards, as well as leaving the option of a combined random review deck. Whereas using both types of cards seems to have been an excellent way of developing a strong initial memory of each character, revealing when one does or does not really remember the character in its entirety, and so providing a strong self-correction mechanism, it seems now a good idea to separate out the two approaches and develop an English first network separate from yet increasingly finely coherently analogous with a likewise increasingly finely coherent and analogous Henze first network, and allow the challenge and confidence reward to exist more predominantly in the speed of retrieval rather than in the totality of recognition. Okay, I don't really, it's funny, I'm following all that, I just don't necessarily follow the emotional side of that, but fair enough. To borrow one of Luke's terms, I'm rejiggering the situation. The two networks, so to speak, are already pretty conjoined. I'm feeling confident they will continue to meet in the middle as needed. We'll see. End of intermediate vocab blitz comments. Now, continuing, he says, before moving on to any further vocabulary, I'm just going to let this core set consolidate for a while and reevaluate. I may satisfy my curiosity and complete an quote-unquote at least one character for every phoneme and tone, unquote, possibility. But that's all for now. So many interesting little observations are waiting to be made. For example, the biang phoneme, not listed in the Brilliant MV phonetic chart, is a bit of an exception in that there is actually a 57-stroke, supposedly most complex novelty character called biang, associated with a particular noodle restaurant somewhere in China. That's in Xi'an, biang biang mian. Biang is then typically described as meaning awesome, as in awesome noodles of a sort. I thought the phoneme was unique to that character and restaurant alone, but just yesterday I happened to discover that buyang, not the same / different, forms a colloquial contraction as biang, and henceforth becomes awesome in the right context. In another example, the phoneme 次 could have any of the four tones associated with it, and yet there are only ever fourth tone characters listed in any dictionary I've yet seen. Yet it seems best to consolidate for now and focus on shifting towards reading and shadowing. Setting these little project-based learning challenges has been increasingly engaging. They have been two rather exciting developments in the pronunciation/listening/mental transcription arena, but I'll leave that for now and give myself 2 solid weeks to shift focus onto listen, sentence, passage, shadow practice leading up to my HSK4 attempt. So you might not be hearing from me for a little while. As always, thank you and cheers. Well, congratulations to Keith for getting so far. I hope that some of that, his techniques were useful to people. Like I said, some of them went a little bit over my head, but I am glad to see that he's doing all this project-based learning and trying to apply, different methods to finding what works for him and what will, ultimately be good reviewing techniques. So definitely a consolidation period is in order here because you put a lot of information into your head real quick. But what's so cool about doing it this way, where you just like wash your brain with loads of different bits of content, is that it's amazing how much of it ends up sticking, partially because you're linking up so many things so quickly. So perhaps there's a link to something in level 51 to level 17. And if you're not moving really quickly through the course, you're not going to discover that link until much later. Now, of course, the disadvantage is that there's no doubt that there are some things that are going to fall out of that, that would have been looked over or just studied too quickly and will fall out. But I think overall you're going to get more benefit than you're going to get lost. And then those things will come in through Anki. Anki will tell you what areas were not perfectly retained. So well done, Keith. Congratulations. That's an incredible achievement. And, we'd like to probably talk to you again. We just did a case study with you, but I'd like to probably talk to you again about how you feel maybe in a couple of weeks after consolidating for a bit. Excellent stuff.